Late-night train rides are usually quiet, almost too quiet. But sometimes, when the cars are empty and the world outside is dark, that's when the scariest encounters can happen. These are 3 disturbing true horror stories from late-night train rides. Story 1. This happened when I was 19, riding home from work in the city. It was close to midnight, and by the time the train reached my stop, most people had already gotten off. I moved into the last car of the train because it was completely empty. At first, I thought it was perfect. I'd finally get some peace and quiet. But as soon as the doors closed, I noticed something strange. At the very end of the car, in the farthest corner, sat a man. I swear he hadn't been there when I walked in. He was wearing a dark hoodie pulled tight over his head. I tried not to stare, but his head was tilted down at an odd angle, like he was watching me without lifting his face. For the next few stops, he never moved. But then, suddenly, he stood up and started walking down the aisle, one slow step at a time. The sound of his shoes against the floor echoed unnaturally loud in the empty car. I pulled out my phone and pretended to be texting, hoping he'd ignore me. Instead, he stopped just a few feet away and sat down directly across from me. Still no words, just silence. When the train slowed for the next stop, I bolted out and into another car with a few people inside. I looked back through the glass door, and there he was, standing pressed up against it, staring at me. He didn't follow when the doors closed, but I'll never forget the image of his hooded face pressed against that glass, watching until the train pulled away. Story 2. I was traveling home after visiting a friend in another city. The ride was long, about 2 hours, and it was already past 1 a.m. The train was quiet, with only a few scattered passengers. Across from me sat a woman in her 40s, neatly dressed, holding a purse in her lap. At first, nothing seemed odd, until I realized she hadn't taken her eyes off me. She was staring directly at me, not glancing, not looking around, just staring. I shifted in my seat, trying to avoid eye contact, but her eyes followed every movement. Minutes passed. She didn't blink, not once. Finally, I whispered to the only other passenger near me, a younger guy with headphones. "Hey, is it just me, or is that lady?" He cut me off, glancing at her, then back at me with wide eyes. "Don't look at her," he muttered. That made my skin crawl. When the train pulled into the next stop, the guy grabbed his bag and left the car immediately. The woman didn't move. She just sat there, her eyes still locked on me. I decided to switch cars too, but just as I stood, the woman smiled. Not a friendly smile, a slow, unnatural curl of her lips, like she knew she had scared me. When I got to the next car, I couldn't relax. Every time the train slowed at a station, I was terrified she'd walk through the doors, but she never did. I don't know if she was unwell or if there was something more sinister behind it, but to this day, I can still picture her face, that unblinking stare, that smile. Story 3. This happened to my cousin when he was traveling late at night through a rural area. The train was nearly empty by the time he boarded. Only one other person sat at the far end of the car, facing away. He settled into his seat and put on his headphones. But after a while, he started to feel uneasy. Every time he glanced down the aisle, the other passengers seemed to have moved slightly closer. At first, they were 5 or 6 rows away, then 4, then 3. But he never actually saw the person move. It was like they had shifted closer every time he looked up without making a sound. Eventually, the figure was only 2 rows away. That's when my cousin realized something terrifying. The person wasn't facing away anymore. They were turned toward him, sitting perfectly still, staring. He ripped out his headphones, and the silence in the train car was overwhelming. No breathing, no footsteps, just the low hum of the train. He stood up and moved quickly into the next car, where a few other passengers sat. When he glanced back through the glass door, the figure was standing in the aisle, unmoving, still watching him. At the next station, my cousin got off the train early and waited for another one. But years later, the image of that silent passenger moving closer and closer without sound still haunts him. Those were three disturbing true horror stories from late-night train rides. Trains may feel safe because of their routine, but sometimes the scariest encounters happen when the cars are almost empty.